The Blackwood Labyrinth. The trail vanished as abruptly as a snapped thread, the sudden silence amplifying the forest's oppressive presence. One moment, Mark was following the worn path through the dense Bulgarian forest; the next, it had dissolved into a treacherous tangle of gnarled roots and fallen leaves, like the grasping fingers of some subterranean beast. He cursed, the late afternoon sun bleeding into a bruised twilight, casting elongated, grotesque shadows that danced with a sinister life of their own. He'd been so intent on reaching the abandoned monastery deep within the Blackwood, a place whispered to hold a dark secret, that he hadn't noticed the path's disappearance, lured by the promise of uncovering a truth best left buried. Blackwood. Even the name tasted of rot and despair. Locals didn't just whisper, they spoke in hushed, fearful tones, their eyes wide with a dread that transcended mere superstition. They told of travelers vanishing without a trace, their screams swallowed by the unyielding trees, of ancient rituals and a malevolent presence that predated even the monastery, a darkness that pulsed beneath the forest floor. Mark, a pragmatic city dweller, a writer seeking inspiration in the macabre, had dismissed their tales as quaint folklore. Now, utterly alone and lost, the stories weren't just gnawing at his rationality, they were clawing at his sanity. He tried to backtrack, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, but the forest seemed to shift and contort around him. Familiar landmarks twisted into alien shapes, mocking his sense of direction. The trees, ancient and twisted, became a suffocating labyrinth, their branches intertwining to form a dense, impenetrable canopy that choked out the last vestiges of light. They weren't just trees, they were petrified watchers, their silence more terrifying than any scream. The air grew heavy, thick with the cloying scent of damp earth and decay, mingling with a new, nauseating sweetness, like overripe fruit left to rot in the sun, and a metallic tang, like old blood. As darkness descended, the forest underwent a grotesque metamorphosis. Familiar shapes contorted into monstrous visages, a gnarled root became a writhing serpent, a cluster of moss resembled a hunched figure, its eyes gleaming in the dark. The rustling of leaves transformed into hushed whispers, sibilant and malevolent, uttering his name with a chilling intimacy. The snapping of twigs sounded like the deliberate footsteps of something large and unseen, stalking him through the undergrowth. Mark's breath hitched in his throat. He wasn't alone, he was being hunted. He pulled out his phone, his hands slick with sweat, but the screen remained stubbornly blank, reflecting his own terrified face back at him. Of course not. He should have told someone, anyone, where he was going, but the allure of the monastery's dark secrets, the forbidden knowledge it held, had been too strong, a siren's call he couldn't resist. Now, he was paying the price. Panic, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, pierced through him. He stumbled through the treacherous undergrowth, his flashlight beam a frantic dance in the overwhelming darkness, revealing only fleeting glimpses of the horrors that surrounded him. He wasn't just imagining eyes in the shadows, he could see them now, glowing with an unholy luminescence, watching him with predatory hunger. The whispers intensified, swirling around him like a vortex of madness, no longer just voices, but fragments of tortured souls, their words laced with agony and despair, promising him a similar fate. He came to a clearing, a small, circular space unnaturally devoid of undergrowth, bathed in an ethereal, sickly pale light that pulsed from the very earth itself. In the center stood a twisted, ancient tree, its bark a mass of grotesque carvings that seemed to writhe and shift before his eyes. Its branches, impossibly long and contorted, reached towards the sky like skeletal arms in a gesture of supplication or perhaps, a desperate attempt to escape the horrors below. Around the base of the tree were strange symbols carved into the earth, glowing with the same eerie light, pulsating like living veins. A sense of dread washed over Mark, a primal fear that transcended logic, a certainty that this place was a wound in the fabric of reality. This place. It felt wrong, corrupted, ancient beyond comprehension that he tried to turn back, to flee the unholy clearing, but his legs wouldn't obey him. He was drawn to the tree, compelled by an unseen force, a will not his own. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, ancient and powerful, that echoed directly in his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. It spoke of sacrifice, of eternal servitude, of the insatiable hunger of the Blackwood. As he reached the tree, the ground beneath him began to tremble. Cracks snaked across the clearing, and from the fissures, grotesque figures emerged. They were human, but twisted and deformed, their flesh pale and stretched, their eyes burning with the same unholy light. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, their limbs contorting at impossible angles. The figure from the shadows was no longer cloaked. It was tall and gaunt, its skin stretched taut over bone, its face a mask of ancient horror. Its eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence, and its mouth opened in a silent scream that resonated with the agony of centuries. The figure raised a hand, its touch like the bite of frost, and Mark felt a searing pain in his head, as if his very thoughts were being flayed, his memories ripped from his mind and devoured. He cried out, a soundless scream of pure terror, collapsing to his knees. The figure spoke, its voice a guttural rasp that seemed to vibrate in his very bones, a sound that bypassed his eardrums and resonated directly with his soul. You have come to the Blackwood, and the Blackwood has claimed you. Your fear is its sustenance, your soul its offering. Mark's vision blurred, and the world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of nightmarish images. He saw glimpses of the forest's dark history, ancient rituals performed under blood-red moons, sacrifices offered to appease the darkness that dwelled within the earth, the trees themselves drinking the spilled blood and growing stronger, more twisted with each passing year. He saw the monastery, not as a place of worship, but as a prison, a place where the forest's victims were held captive, their life force slowly drained away. He realized, with a horrifying certainty that shattered his sanity, that the legends were not just true, they were a pale reflection of the unspeakable reality. The Blackwood wasn't just a forest, it was a living entity, a sentient darkness, a place of ancient evil that stretched back to the dawn of time, and he was now bound to it, body and soul. He tried to scream, to beg for release, but no sound came. His vocal cords were paralyzed, his body no longer his own, his will utterly subsumed by the malevolent consciousness of the Blackwood. The figure reached out, its touch cold and clammy, like the embrace of a corpse, and Mark knew that his ordeal was far from over. It was only just beginning, an eternity of torment and servitude stretching before him. He was no longer lost. He had been found, devoured, and reborn as a part of the forest's eternal darkness.